The modern country of Liberia, which is located on the western coast of Africa, actually has its historical roots connected to the United States. Um, it was actually founded by the American Colonization Society as a form of reparations for slavery. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, I decided to choose this topic for Black History Month. Um, the word February is actually Latin, and it means to cleanse or to perform some sort of cleansing ritual. And it is my belief that this is basically the purpose of Black History Month, to provide a virtue signaling cleansing to white liberals. We don't typically, or at least in my view, we typically don't actually go over Black history or examine any sort of subject or topic relevant to that. It's basically just a bunch of white people going over slavery again, and it's a form of cultural self-flagellation, in my opinion. So I decided that, I wanted to talk about a subject that's not very popular or well known, and so I decided the country of Liberia was the perfect subject for that. So, the ACS, the American Colonization Society, it was originally founded in 1816 by a pastor named Robert Finley. And surprisingly, it actually had bipartisan support amongst the Democrats in the South and the Republicans of the North. Um, it was opposed by two main groups. One were the abolitionists, and also by freeborn or emancipated blacks. And the reason it was started was because people at the time, because this is the early 1800s, they believed that integration between blacks and whites were impossible, and that the best route for freeborn or emancipated blacks were to migrate back to Africa and form their own country. The president of the ACS was Henry Clay, who was the Speaker of the House for a long time and was also a failed three-time presidential candidate. So he was a very high-ranking American politician. And this bipartisan support would last all the way up to the Civil War. They did send a lot of black migrants to Liberia, and these people are known as Americo-Liberians. They are Americans who went to Africa, as opposed to an African American who is an African who went to America. The Americo-Liberians that founded the country and wrote the Constitution actually modeled itself off of the United States. They didn't really want to abandon that connection. And one thing that is interesting is that in the Liberian Constitution, you have to own land. So in our Constitution that was originally written, you had to be a rich white landowning male. In the Liberian Constitution, you had to be a rich black landowning male. What this did, well, one of the results was that the native Liberians didn't own land, and so they became very disenfranchised over time. And it's just one of the things that really stand out to me about the history of Liberia is that these former slaves, these emancipated slaves, went over to Africa and basically enslaved the Africans and put them on plantations. Now, I believe that Liberia was neutral during World War One, but during World War II, the Republic of Liberia was on the side of the Allies and the United States. And so at the end of World War II, we get Liberia's longest reigning and most prosperous president, William Tubman. But because Liberia was such an ally during World War II, it received a lot of infrastructure grants and money being sent over from the United States, which led to, a lot of prosperity for the country. When he would leave office, his vice president, William Tolbert, would take over, and he would be president from 1971 up until 1980. And 1980 would see the end of the Republic of Liberia and would bring in the democracy of Liberia. There was a general named Samuel Doe who was a native African Liberian. He was not an Americo-Liberian. And he would lead an uprising against William Tolbert. And this uprising would see President Tolbert removed from power and executed. And then Samuel Doe would rule the country through his party, the People's Redemption Council. Now, as I said in another video, the word demos means people in Greek. And so demos kratos means power of the people. And so once again, here you see that a people's council is taken over. So now the people have power. And so this would begin the democracy of Liberia, in my view. And it all goes downhill. All that peace and prosperity that was built up through the past century is about to give way to famine, civil war, rape, atrocity, fake elections, etc., the usual MO of any democratic movement. And there was a man who was in his cabinet who was known as Charles Taylor. And Charles Taylor would become a horrible warlord, but he was being charged with embezzlement. And so he fled to the United States, where he was arrested, and the United States put him in jail. But Charles Taylor would then escape the United States and would return to Africa, where he was actually funded by Muammar Gaddafi. And while being funded and trained by Gaddafi, he was actually able to launch a coup from the neighboring country of Cote d'Ivoire. So, with this funding from Gaddafi, he actually overthrew Samuel Doe, and Samuel Doe was executed. I believe that execution was recorded, and it's one of the few recordings of an assassinated world leader. Ironically, that same fate would fall Gaddafi later on during Obama's presidency and the Arab Spring. Charles Taylor's group was known as the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, or the NPFL. And after the first Liberian Civil War, which was his overthrow of Samuel Doe, he actually ran and won the presidency of Liberia in 1997. He ran on the slogan, "He killed my ma, he killed my pa, but I will vote for him." And if that doesn't sound like something a Democrat would do, but anyway, he would win the 1997 election and become the president of Liberia. His presidency would be horrendous. He was very active in instigating the civil war in neighboring Sierra Leone. Interesting, he was involved in sale of blood diamonds and weapons. According to Wikipedia, anyway, he got weapons from Victor Bout, who, of course, was freed by Joe Biden for a women's basketball player, of all things, not even an NBA star. He used child soldiers. He allowed for rape and as a means of warfare. Like I said, he is a convicted warlord, a war criminal, killed millions of people. So then near the end of his presidency, there was a rebel group from the north of Liberia that pushed in to oust him from his presidency. And this would be the second Liberian Civil War. And eventually there was a group of it was a group called ECOMOG, which is the Economic Coalition of Middle African Governments, that was led by Nigeria. And with pressure from the United States during the presidency of George Bush, Charles Taylor would actually resign as president of Liberia in 2003, which brought an end to the Second Liberian Civil War. And then in 2005, Liberia would elect its first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Now, I believe today that Liberia is pretty much a stable country. They're not, killing and raping each other. But the one thing that I do want to add my 2 cents to is that when we look at the political question in the United States of reparations, it is irrelevant whether or not you are in favor of reparations or you are opposed to reparations. The fact is that there is already legal precedent for reparations to Black people for slavery, and it is the existence of Liberia. And herein lies the problem, because Black liberals are Democrats and Democrats are anti-federalists, and they're not looking for a solution. Even though that's a perfectly good compromise, liberals, whether they be white, Black, gay, cishet, trans, whatever. Liberals in general are not looking for solutions. They're just looking to complain. And so no black liberal group would ever consider moving to Liberia, not because they love America, but because that's a solution and they don't want to put in the effort that is required to make that solution. They just want to complain and they want other people to basically just solve all their problems and give them money. That's really what they want. They just want a handout. They don't really want reparations for slavery because while they complain that their ancestors, were brought from Africa to America against their will, which is very true, the transatlantic slave trade was not voluntary. A lot of black people in America at the time did not want to go back to Africa. So it's equally as true that your ancestors agreed to stay. And because that happened after the transatlantic slave trade, that actually would take more precedent as they are closer in your ancestral lineage than those taken from Africa. Yeah, I just feel like Black History Month is a complete facade, and even just the idea of separating white history from black history is pretty segregationist. And, it's a Democrat thing, and Democrats supported both slavery and segregation. So I feel like just the existence of Black History Month is an intellectual continuity of Democrat segregationism. It's just the whole thing's very weird to me. I just feel that you see black celebrities go over to Africa. They talk about Africa like it's just one single fucking country. You could stay over there. You don't have to come back if you hate America that bad. And I also feel that America should really seek in making Liberia a stronger ally, and we should have that public consciousness that Liberia is like a real ally to the United States in Africa. Obviously, it's not the only successful country. Nigeria is very successful. Botswana is very successful. But we could strengthen those alliances with Liberia, and also in fighting, terrorism. Charles Taylor was this warlord who killed and raped millions of people. He's being funded by Muammar Gaddafi. I didn't mention this, but during his presidency, he gave refuge to the Al Qaeda suicide bombers who blew up an embassy in Kenya. So I just feel that a strong relationship with Liberia would just totally line up perfectly with the United States and our geopolitical goals and even our domestic goals. And so that's my 2 cents. But all right, that does it for the video. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. If you're a new viewer, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I plan on making more videos. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for taking the time out to watch a video, and thank you for coming back. Also, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe.